Behold, my glorious supporter, True Mr.FOoT, asks what my relationship is with my viewers. So True Mr.FOoT has a little blurb explaining here, so I'm going to read that. True Mr.FOoT writes, there is this concept of parasocial interactions or parasocial relationships, which are, to grossly oversimplify, relationships you have with people you never talk to. For example, if you listen to a radio show every single evening, at some point you will get the feeling that you know the host of the show as a person, and you start to build that sort of one-sided friendship with that person. In the last few decades, parasocial relationships have started to become more and more real, with blogs and YouTube and online comments that blur the line to a real relationship. And finally, with Twitch streams, Patreon, and Discord, you can have actual conversations, like the one True Mr.FOoT and I had when we were talking about this. So to get to the actual question, True Mr.FOoT asks, what is that relationship like from the other side? So parasocial relationships are totally a thing. They're relevant to my work. But Mr. Food is asking, what are they like in reverse? Like, how does it feel for me that other people have these parasocial relationships with me? It's not the same thing, right? Or is it? Do you feel like you know your viewers on a personal level? If so, just the Patreon crowd or Twitch regulars? And finally, have you ever felt like a viewer knew you better than you felt comfortable? I have things to say about all those things. So yes, totally. So the first thing I want to say is that parasocial relationships are fascinating and difficult to pronounce. It is a topic that is complicated because, on the one hand, there are many types of content where you want to appear friendly. Like, I don't want to represent myself as an unfriendly person, like, just for the simple reason of having some humanity, you know? But as various creators have mentioned, it's important to clarify that you're not actually friends with the people per se until you potentially are. It's so muddy, you know? So I'm going to talk about that first. So this is the idea that you want to be friendly but not friends with the people that you're with. Now, why not? It's important to have some healthy distance. It's important for you as a creator to be given the distance from your viewers, where they acknowledge that it is a parasocial relationship, where it's like, it's not that I don't like let's just say you all watching, or anything like that. It's just that it is important for it to be compartmentalized in my life. A huge problem that almost everybody that does this kind of job has is that it's very difficult to stop working mentally. You can put down, you can turn off the computer or whatever, but you could always be doing more. Like, there's no timetable. There are always viewers awake. You could always be making more content. It's never enough, And one important aspect of letting it be enough is to say, this is just part of my life. It is to some degree compartmentalized. And for that to happen, the relationships need to be compartmentalized. You have to be able to assume that even if something goes badly on a stream or on Discord or on YouTube, it's not like your life is that thing now, You can see where I'm going with this with a lot of types of creators nowadays who've really failed to draw that barrier, and their viewers have kind of overwhelmed and overflowed their personal life. YouTube is kind of set up in this way, YouTube in particular, where it's optimized for you to share and contentify every single part of your life, which is extremely unhealthy. Like, it just, no matter what your lifestyle is, no matter how much you think you want that, it is a bad decision, period. Do not do that. It is a bad choice. You need to deliberately decide when you want things to be part of your work life, When I want to talk like this is probably the most, like what I'm doing right now, is probably the most personal thing I do, where somebody just asks me a question, much like a friend of mine might ask me, like, I just want to talk about this thing. Can we talk? And we talk about this thing. And yet it's still very much, I'm presenting something to you, And you can respond, and please do respond in the comments if you have things to say. I get to them as I have time. But ultimately, it's just like on Twitch. Like, if you ask a question in chat, I want to answer because I enjoy answering it, which is why I made it my job. But at the end of the day, you are not owed or guaranteed an answer, I mean, here actually on Patreon you are, but it's transactional, that is the way in which it is compartmentalized a bit. All of my patrons understand that I can't just make videos about whatever you want to hear about at any time. You know what I mean? Like they're like just for practical purposes. Like I like talking about this stuff, but I can't do it for free for kind of a complicated reason, you know? And so that's one way in which it's different to me, you know? For the most part, it's like there's this gray area between, it's not that it's like my job, and the way I treat my work is very much that it's what I actually want to do. So it's not that exactly. And it's not that I don't like the people. I do like most of you. I have had a very good time with all of you. One of the reasons I wanted to start doing this as a career was so I could enjoy the company of others on the internet while I enjoy doing the things that I enjoy doing, like playing video games and talking about builds. But at the same time, there's this gray area. I don't think that I can define it any more cleanly than that. There's just like there is this barrier needed where it's like I want you to perceive the genuine friendliness that I feel toward you all, while making it clear that like we're not, the thing that we are is not friends. We are much closer to being associates, I would say, or like work compatriots of some kind. And I think that one advantage of my style of content, especially here on Patreon, is that we have another type of relationship available that we can hold on to. So for a lot of creators, it's like, well, the relationship they and their viewers have is nebulous. It needs to be well defined in a way because that's an important boundary, but there isn't any obvious thing for it to be. Whereas for me, all of you kind of work on my videos with me to some degree, you know, like we are work partners to some degree. You are patrons providing for my work, or viewers that are helping figure out like stuff for my builds and such. So there is a sort of dynamic that is available for that, you know. I think that that helps a lot personally. So overall, what does the relationship feel like to me? I would say it feels like I'm the head of a department and you all work with me or are clients, or but clients the way that you'd have a more personal relationship with a client. I guess it feels like that, or I mean, I don't know what that feels like because that hasn't happened to me before, but that it feels like what I imagine that would feel like. It feels like my dad is a financial advisor. It feels like what I imagine he feels when he works with his clients. These are fairly personal relationships where you sit down in a room in comfortable armchairs and talk about your money, possibly after having repeatedly seen that person, albeit not very often, for like 10 years ongoing, you know? To say that it's not a personal, to some degree, relationship would be inaccurate, but there's still a very clear divide. And most importantly, there is a topic, a specific topic that is like always kind of there. Where, for example, no offense to all of you, but if you try to recommend me things that you think I'd find fun to play that aren't related to Buildcraft and Synergy the way I've talked about them on my channel, no offense whatsoever, but it's a crapshoot. Like, you don't know me that way. Like, you don't know what I like that way. And so there is kind of that boundary. Okay, moving on. Do you feel like you know your viewers on a personal level? Yes, sometimes. I think that that's probably not true. Something that I try to remember is very likely not true. But yes, it often does feel like that. And to some degree, I think I do. I think a shtick that I've had that I haven't said as much lately, but if you have not heard me say it before, is that when you get people in their leisure time, you know, you're watching me generally casually. Some of you watch me on stream when you're at work, but generally when you're watching a YouTube video I made, and a lot of you when you watch a stream as well, that's your leisure time. You are relaxed, and overall your guard is down. So I am getting a pretty genuine version of how you are in your leisure time to some degree, like as text permits, you know, in a way that, for example, your work colleagues probably don't experience you. There are ways in which I might know that part of you better, and I would argue that that is a more relevant part of you to know. Whereas the reverse is not true, going back to how your parasocial relationship with me is not the same as mine with you, where what all of you know of me is a pretty specific, ultimately compartmentalized part of my life, whereas for all of you, it couldn't be further from that. Like, this is something that's pretty broad. It's kind of your breakout mindset. I know not everybody's like this. Occasionally I see a viewer and I think, you come here for a specific thing, but you don't normally want or need or engage in this thing that much. It's something that you really enjoy getting to dip your foot into and or settle down into like a jacuzzi every so often to marinate your thoughts in a little bit. But this isn't something that you always do all the time, you know? For example, a lot of you watch other streamers or other YouTube channels, and basically nobody does the thing the way that I do. So clearly you enjoy other stuff during that time, you know? And so you are in a sort of particular mindset. Anyway, so that's the thing. Mr. Fruit specified this idea of like, do I feel differently about the Patreon crowd and the Twitch regulars compared to everyone else? Yes, very, very definitely so. Because I actually know things about all of you. Like, not, you know, nothing intimate or important, but certainly general stuff, you know? I have some sense after being asked questions from all of you for like a year and hearing your responses or lovely sentiments that you've given me. A lot of you, longer term patrons especially, have been very kind over the years. A lot of you Twitch regulars, I've known some for 2 or 3 years in the limited particular way that we've known each other. And so, yes, I do think that those are very different relationships than, for example, there's the occasional YouTube commenter that isn't a Twitch or Patreon person that I do recognize because they comment frequently, but I don't know much about them. Like, a lot of the time their comments are pretty indistinct, inconsistent, or just short enough that, like, I recognize them as, oh, frequently positive commenter, or someone whose general shtick is, like, I have one commenter that has this, like, they're always on this agenda of, like, digital extremes is ultimately evil, basically. And no matter what video I make, whenever they comment, they're always writing this long shtick about how digital extremes is evil. And a lot of the time they intersperse it, or they're one of those people that comments twice sometimes, where they'll say something, you know, relevant to the video, but they are very wary. This is one of those weird types of commenters where they seem to watch my content basically religiously, but they don't like me. Like, I don't know why they watch it all the time. I wish they wouldn't, to be honest with you, but ultimately I think that it does make good examples. This is not a crazy person. This is a very biased person. So, you know, like, that's not very much information, but do I know nothing about them? No, I wouldn't say that, you know. You would have some idea what to expect if you met them in person. That's the way I like to think of it. Like, how much would we be on the same page if we met in person? And I'm extraordinarily picky when I'm with people in person. I have a very small circle of friends in my life. I don't really keep acquaintances. Like, I either have someone in my life or I don't a lot of the time. I don't keep up with people if we're not relevant to each other's lives anymore. I'm not trying to burn bridges or anything. It just, like, it's not, if it's not natural, it doesn't work, that's fine. There's no hard feelings there. So if I were to meet a lot of you in real life, even you patrons or Twitch regulars that I would say I know comparatively well, compared to the people that I know personally, it's nothing, though. Like, that's, like, it's basically nothing. And I think that because I have a tendency to know the people in my personal life so well personally, the contrast is more apparent, and I don't really think of it as being like a meaningfully large amount of information. I do definitely have, you know, I have a concept of people in my head. Occasionally I attach an age or some general, not occupation, but like area of life to people. I'm often wrong, for what it's worth. A lot of the time that doesn't make any sense. It's pretty interesting when occasionally I've gotten to meet viewers in person. That usually isn't like it's not a shock, but it is different, and I find it personally kind of nice to get to update that with an image of the person. So anyway, maybe not a lot of good definitive things to say about that, but I do find it interesting, and yes, I do definitely think that there are kind of 2 levels of getting to know how, like, reverse parasocial relationship that I have with all of you, and there's one that is not the Patreon crowd or Twitch regulars, and one that is. Simply because that is a meaningful jump. Definitely, my Twitch stream is way more intimate than all my other content, and if you're a patron, especially with Parley access, I'm getting a lot more information about you in a kind of backwards way. We're getting like a reverse parasocial relationship where you ask me a thing and then I like gab about a thing, and we have this relationship that's built on that, which is very strange, but a surprisingly decent way to get to know someone. Anyway. Finally, have you ever felt like a viewer knew you better than you felt comfortable? Yeah, or, well, they didn't actually know me better than I felt comfortable with, but it has more frequently than I would have thought before you asked this happened that a viewer acted like they knew me better than I am I mean, better than it is respectful to think. I have frequently had people really decry me as a human being just because, I mean, this is the obvious way that you're not really talking about, but just as an example, really slander my name as an organic life form just for like saying something a certain way. Like I remember I had in the Status Revised video I made, at the end I said, I kind of feel like this update happened this way, a really bad way, for a lot of reasons, and I think there's things that the players and the developers can do. And then I said, in turn, what I thought the players and the developers can do. And these statements were maybe no less than a minute apart. And I had somebody comment that had been a big part of the community, not anymore, that was furious that I was ass kissing the developers and throwing the players under the bus, and you can't expect the players to whatever. Like, I didn't say any of that stuff. And right after I said, like, players, you could do this thing better, which they undeniably can. Like, the players bear some responsibility. The community bears some responsibility. I don't care how much, neither should you. You assumed I said all. I did not say all. In fact, literally 1 second after finishing saying that, I explained this other thing. So there are people who, when they see things like that, you get viewers that they start systematically trying to break down, like, you've been like this the whole time, and here's like one example that is out of context. That's obnoxious and insulting, and you shouldn't do that. And you should really reckon that if you don't like someone's content, you could just stop watching it. And it doesn't mean that you know some great thing about them. You have not unlocked the door to their mind. No. Even if the way that I had said that thing meant that, you're just noticing what could easily have been like, I had to rush to make the video, and so that wasn't exactly what I or whatever creator meant. That wasn't the case with this video, but that one thing, it doesn't mean anything. Like, it really doesn't mean anything. Like, you don't know a thing about me because of that. You know a thing about the Zandypants entity, maybe. But that thing probably isn't even what that thing said. It could just be like, that I am rushed, or that I don't know how I want to solve this problem, and so I suggested something. But anyway, that was really someone taking something not with a grain of salt, not checking their own bias. They were coming into it thinking, you're going to say it's all the player's fault. And then I said something that even remotely lined up with that, and they just kind of grabbed onto it and didn't listen to anything else. But of course, this happens all the time. That's not what you're talking about, but I do think it's related. And yes, I think that happens pretty frequently, that people kind of mistake this parasocial relationship. The ironic thing, and the reason I brought all of that up, besides, honestly, just to vent a little bit, it was pretty annoying, don't do that, not that any of you would, but, is also that there's this interesting pattern where the people who do that are always, from my perception, maybe this is a better way to answer most of this question than everything else I've said, they're the people who understand the least about what I'm like. They've formed the flimsiest parasocial relationship with me. Out of all of my viewers, they're in the lowest percentile of, like, they've meaningfully connected with something I've made. They have only the most superficial relationship with the thing that I've been making, but they're the people, for whatever reason, that think that they know me as a person the most and are the most confident that I am this way that they figured out, and they seem to feel the most betrayed, I guess. Even though, you never liked my content to begin with. Like, you were never really paying attention to begin with. Like, this thing that you thought you understood, and then I've betrayed you about this thing or whatever. Like, first of all, I didn't do that in the first place. But second of all, like, you never understood that thing in the first place. We were never on the same page, which I think is really weird. Anyway, so that is a topic. That defines how I feel about this. Basically, the less people feel like they know me, or the less they're seeking approval or wanting to idolize, that's a thing that happens that's a little weird to me. The more the people actually do know me fairly well, which is weird because they act the opposite way. The humbler they act, the less humble they would really need to be because they've often really understood something. But I think that what you mean, I've gone on about that for a long time. I think that ended up being the best answer to this question. But anyway, I think what you probably had in mind was more like somebody messaging me privately or something, and like, people will Google the creator or something, and then they know creepy details about you. That hasn't really happened. I also just feel like I don't like, why, you know what I mean? The thing about bullying, and that is bullying, it's stalking, kind of a reverse passive bullying. The thing about that is that it's something that you really feed. It's not the victim's fault, but it is true that if there's nothing to feed the bully, the stalker, whatever, if there's nothing to add to this myth that they've created about the person, it's very difficult for people to mentally latch onto that. And these are people that are they're very one note. Like, you can disarm people like this with something as simple as an ideology like that. And so I think that it's not a coincidence that hasn't happened to me. There are people who will, like, occasionally you get people who, it's not because they read it in some corner case situation, like on Coffee, it says my account name is Alexander Pants. It's not people who've read this, but occasionally you get people who say like Alexander or like Xander. I don't really like it when people attempt to call me my like actual name. That's an icky, creepy kind of familiarity, in my opinion. It's not the end of the world. Some people have done that here and there, just as a joke or like a ad-lib thing. It can sometimes be funny in context. Don't feel bad, I guess. But yeah, that's weird. I don't know. Like, you have an internet name. It would be weird if somebody said your real name in like a different way than you normally do. Imagine if if you introduced yourself as Hank, and then someone called you John. You'd be like, what the hell? Like, no, that's weird. Like, just say the name that I told you. It's the most basic part of human relationships. Anyway, whatever. So that bothers me sometimes. This end bit became complainy. I should have known. But there you go. That is how I feel. Overall, I just want to drive home the point, not to go out of my way to end this video on a positive note. I just honestly want you to know, if you're listening to this, that I have an overwhelmingly positive relationship interacting with all of you. I have never known any of my friends from this industry, or anyone I've watched in this industry, or any online community that is as overall objectively just net positive and mentally healthy as the one that I have. It's not perfect at all, totally, but I think that basically everything that could not be toxic about an online community isn't in ours. It could still get better in some ways, but ultimately I feel like the core problems of many of these communities, I at least don't feel like I'm experiencing, which I'm very thankful for. I mean, it's because of my efforts as well, but it's a joint effort with all of you. So thank you for being great people in this online space that we made together. I really appreciate it. It is a great triumph to me that I was able to help make this online community that is decidedly better, not perfect, but decidedly better than most others. And a lot of the time people join my stream chat, or they're in Discord for a little while, and they even go out of their way to say, like, wow, this is a lot nicer than most other communities I've been in. This is noticeably different in this immediate way, which is heartwarming. And it's really funny how occasionally people will comment on, like, we don't have moderators, I moderate everything, and people say, yeah, chat seems really nice, like, thank the moderators. And I'm like, no, like, that's not a thing. Like, these people are just nice. Like, that's all it is. Occasionally we have to ban people, but it doesn't happen very often. So anyway, Mr. Food, I hope that I answered your question. It's a bit of an elusive question. I hope that became clear to everyone, but I hope that I answered it in a way that was interesting and satisfying. And yes, I just opened up and complained a little bit, but what are you going to do? Overall, I do want to get the message across that I've had a very positive experience of most of you. So thank you.